Amazing. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the third Global Voices event. My name is Andri, and today I'm joined by two very familiar faces. If you joined our last Global Voices call, Carlos and Selma. Today we will be wrapping up our Green Point campaign by talking a bit about what Carlos and Selma have been doing since COP26 and how young people can continue being involved in climate activism now that COP is over. So feel free to add any questions or thoughts in the comment section below as we go along. So Carlos, Selma, thank you both for joining us again. For those in the audience who maybe did not see the first call, would you mind introducing yourselves and telling us a bit about where you're from, what you're doing, are you students, for example, and why climate change is so important for you? Carlos,
Sure.
Sure. I can. Oh, go ahead, Carlos.
Yeah, I get. Yeah, I'll go because there's some delay, I think. Sure. So my name is Carlos. I come from the Canary Islands, Spain, and I was representing Spain at the Conference of Youth, which is like the youth equivalent of COP. I study biology at the University of Bristol, and I'm the chair of the sustainability network at this university. So I'm very involved in sustainability in general. So that includes environmental, social, and economic sustainability. And a big chunk of my dedication here is all around climate change. So thank you very much for having me again, Andri.
Amazing, thank you. And Selma, what about you?
So my name is Selma. I'm 19 years old. I'm a student at Sciences Po, which is in France. I started climate activism when I was 15, so that's almost 4 years ago. Wow, time flies. With Youth for Climate Movements of Luxembourg. And ever since, I've just been really passionate, and that's what I'm studying in school as well, and that's what I'm gearing towards. I'd love to perhaps one day work at the United Nations to kind of have a role, kind of like we had at COP26, build a more permanent one to make change from the inside. If that's possible, I don't know, we can talk about that later. And so in my university, I'm also part of Sciences Po Environnement, which is sort of a network where we have many campuses, and within the campuses, we try to have as much radical as possible climate action within the campuses, within our cities, and within the French nation.
Amazing, thank you for that. Small delay again. It's all right. So again, it's lovely to be with you. It's been a while since we last spoke. So can you tell us a bit what you've been up to since? Because climate activism is a bit like a full-time job for both of you, right? So what have you been up to?
I don't know if I speak for both of us, Carlos, but I think thankfully one of the cool things from this COP was there was a lot of media attention. So I was kind of busy talking to a lot of Luxembourgish press, even press in Scotland. So that was really great, and having more visibility. Also keeping kind of a correspondence with my Minister of the Environment. One of the things that I was really, really adamant about during the COP was trying to hound her down and find her in order to have an official spot dedicated for youth within the delegation. So I'm working with her on that currently, trying to build up the information and see how, sorry, I'm a bit sick, see how the other countries have done it. And in order, to just have our voice, because I don't know about you, Carlos, but I feel like that's really what was missing during COP26 is if you weren't part of the national delegation, you really weren't heard that much. And even when you were in the national delegation as a youth, it was kind of hard. So yeah, just trying to make sure that we at least have our voice there. And also just working with my university and the different campuses to have more radical action and also spread information to the students about the COP, because that's something that's not always very known. I don't know how you felt about it, Carlos.
Yeah. Oh, I'm unmuted. Yeah, 100%. I think that really resonates with my case, Selma. It is true that not only before, but especially during and after COP26, there was a lot of media attention. Just like you, I was like there was media everywhere. It was the event of the year and one of the most important events in the climate change history, right? So yeah, there was like some Scottish and British TV channels or Instagram lives or even like national press. Well, in my case, it was the regional one, the Canary Islands. But anyways, that was a very, 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 big momentum in which young people, even though we didn't have that much of a voice within the COP26, I think, especially in the negotiation side. It is true that outside of these negotiations, we were one of the, main characters. So after COP26, I've been very involved. I was motivated before, but now I see where we're going, and I'm more like motivated to create a bigger impact. So the university, especially, which is where I'm focusing now, apart from my degree, which I'm doing my dissertation now, we've been doing some other events around climate change, and one of them very recently was held last week, actually, with some of the IPCC authors of the last report that they launched, which was about the physics, the physical changes in climate change. So that was really insightful, and very, many people were really interested in hearing from them. It was super enjoyable. Some other events include, consumption, zero waste, etc., and we have so many others in the pipeline for the next term. We want to embed sustainable development in the curriculum of the university. We might talk about that later. We're preparing the sustainability careers fair, and we want to ensure that every single student has the chance to, learn about the careers in sustainability, regardless of your degree or your background. It's not just for politics students or biology students or geography students, but it's for anyone that wants to make an impact in this field. So yeah, very involved, and of course in activism and promoting awareness however we can. I did some other interviews during COI and COP that I have to edit. I have to catch up with this work, and I hope to release them as soon as I can, eventually in the next weeks, say 1-2 months potentially. So yeah, a lot of momentum that we created, and many things to do.
Very busy.
Very, very busy. That's amazing. And we have the first couple of comments coming in, so keep them coming. We'd love to engage with you through this call. So Carlos, from what you were saying, it seems like actually many people still talk about COP26. Perhaps we don't see it that much in media, but there's definitely discussions being held out there. So do you feel like even though COP ended, people are finally realizing that the climate crisis is kind of a constant thing that we need to continuously work towards?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that even before COP, in general, we saw a very, a trend in the awareness of the society in general. Like, people know that climate change is here, and especially we saw in the IPCC that finally, the scientific community ratified that climate change is, like, there's no doubt that climate change is generated by anthropogenic emissions, which translates onto human activity. So it is a fact, and I think that people know about that. And it was great again to see so much media. It was in every channel. COP26 was everywhere when it happened. So yeah, I think that there's a lot of awareness, and we are still talking about that because, again, it was a big event, but we have to ensure that we keep the progress going, and it's not just a tick box event that we hold once a year, and then we forget about that. It's about creating more momentum and building on top of what we've created. So there were some negotiations, some agreements, some Glasgow Pact around, for example, like cutting 30% of the methane emissions. How we're going to do that? The climate finance. Finally, the Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, which is about funding the developing world, as I call it. So of course, there's again a lot of work to do in every single industry, I would say, especially in the energy and finance industry. So there's no doubt that we really have to keep talking about this.
Incredible. And Selma, what are your thoughts on it? Yeah, that would be perfect.
sorry. I'm so sorry about the delay. But yes, just to I think add on to Carlos, I think it's really great that you had quite a positive outlook, because I think the outlook that we had was quite. People were just really disappointed and really sad about the outcome. I think even the president of COP himself was tearing up when he gave the results of the Glasgow agreement, and I just know that the wrath and the anger of the youth and the indigenous peoples and just the people from the global south was really huge, and I think we were let down in so many ways. We were let down by not having the $100 billion a year respected, for the global north to give to the global south for just, I think it wasn't even loss and damages, it was just for like adaptation and mitigation. And then there was no sort of fund given to the loss and damage clause, which was supposed to be like the main frontier, like the main new element of this COP26. So we were really disappointed on that. I know that, for instance, the Prime Minister of Barbados was just extremely vocal about that anger, as were so many other activists. For instance, I have some friends from the MAPA region, so the most affected regions, for instance, like in sub-Saharan Africa, and they were just over it. They came to COP26 kind of more to meet other activists than the leaders themselves, because they just knew this was going to be the ending. This was going to be the outcome, and that the change can only really come from us, from organizing and protesting. So personally, I think maybe just my outlook as an activist, and I don't know, but I just was very underwhelmed and very disappointed. Although it was a great opportunity to meet so many people, great leaders as well, it was just not what we expected. I don't know. I kind of believed, maybe naively so, that we could have another COP21, but that wasn't the outcome, and therefore just really disappointed, I think.
Great. Thanks for sharing your thoughts. Axa and I were actually doing a social media campaign during COP26, and that was a framework in which the first call happened. And in many ways, we related to what you just mentioned, Selma, this idea that actually the real change was when we're talking to the young people and the activists in the COP Youth Hub, or with you, or just kind of in the events taking place kind of parallel to COP, but not in COP. So it's very interesting that you feel the same way, but obviously you two and other young activists have done a lot to kind of vocalize these issues and contribute to that. And you're both very active on social media. So I was wondering, obviously there are many people who are not all that in favor of taking action against climate change. So how did it feel for you the first couple of times you shared your opinions or you shared your content on social media? Was it easy, or were you worried about what responses you were going to get?
You want to start? Shall I go? Yeah, okay.
Go ahead, Carlos.
Yeah, big question, because social media, I mean, especially in my case, I see that as a potential toxic weapon in which, people can get like mentally devastated in some cases, and it doesn't really, it doesn't serve as a positive tool. So to be fair, like before being that active as I'm today, I quit like Instagram for a year because I wasn't interested. So when I came back, it was just to have a purpose, to use the tool. So I would say that for everyone that is interested in, that would like to jump onto this activism and digital promotion, I will encourage them to just do whatever they think is a good thing to do. It's as simple as that. So when we talk about, for example, COP26, and I add myself to the list of people that were, really disconcerted, I think that it was very insufficient. I think that the right thing to do is to, let other people know what happened, because it's a very complex issue, and sort of translate the scientific language to the global audience, for example. So it can be tricky at first to put yourself out there. You have like many people watching what you're doing, but at the end of the day, not everyone really cares that much about what you do. And if you are doing the right thing, you are very prone to have many people supporting you eventually. So just go for it. It's as simple as that. Just go for it. Start small. Start maybe like resharing something, and then create your own content eventually. So don't care about what people say. That's my key message.
Amazing, very inspirational as well. Selma, what do you think? How was it for you?
I guess I'd have to. Oops, sorry, Andrew, you were saying something.
No, I was just saying, go ahead. How was it for you?
I think I'd have to agree with you, Carlos. Like the whole not caring about if we do or do not post. I understand it can be a toxic environment, but I think as a youth activist, you know that social media is your biggest tool, literally your biggest tool for traction, for attention, for to be taken seriously by global leaders. Period. I know that without social media, we would not be meeting with these leaders at home or at COP26. It would just be it just wouldn't be possible. And the kind of the beauty, I think, of social media is that you don't need to be a certain age, have a certain education, be of a certain social standing to have access and have a voice and have a platform and voice your concerns truthfully without filter and without being censored. So that's kind of what we, in the Fridays for Future and Youth for Climate movement, have been using since the very beginning. That's how we connected like schools from all over the country to be able to protest in streets and then have some sort of leverage, have some sort of popular opinion and will to hold over politicians, to hold them accountable. Without that, I think we would have never been able to do what we did. Like, for instance, a really big action that I'm really proud of, and I was so happy to be able to do it, was when we blocked a bridge from the city center to the financial district in Luxembourg, which is actually very polluting because of fossil finance, all those kinds of things. And it was right before the European elections, and Luxembourg is quite a capital for European institutions. And so we blocked the bridge as a symbol to say that you either vote for the climate now or never. And never would that have been possible without climate social media traction, without a whole community backing us up, whether they were in the climate community or not, whether they were just students and young people who just had Instagram, you know. And I think an even more wonderful thing is TikTok now. Like, you have a reach that is unimaginable. It just you can just post something and you will have hundreds and even sometimes thousands of people. I've gathered like scary amount of views personally. I had never thought I could, but thankfully that's possible. And I know that's how my fellow colleagues are able to do that as well. And that's how we keep connected as well. Like, we inspire each other and we keep at it. And I think social media was really important in the wake of COP26, like afterwards, for people to voice their opinions and their concerns and their disappointments. So that's how, because obviously coming from the global north, the climate crisis is a huge deal for me, especially because I am half Moroccan and I have family in the global south. But other than that, I'm quite privileged to say that it doesn't affect me more than that, to be honest. But it's important to stay connected and see the realities of these people who can just share it so easily. Whether you know global south, global north, wherever in the world, you can see their experiences, live it with them and live through them. And I think that just opens our eyes up more to reality, builds a solid network and a solid sort of just anger that leads us to action and leads us to connect and be active in the face of political inaction. So I think that's why social media is so important.
Yeah, exactly. Just to add a bit on that, we like it or not, social media is the main channel. Like, people don't watch that much TV or other channels. Like, that's a way to reach people. And TikTok is just a booming app that boosts our organic reach. So, it's a must, I think, if you want to reach, especially the youngest generations, right? As we were talking last time with other activists on this same platform, we really have to create these networks and to empower young people. So again, it is crucial to be connected in some way on the digital world. So 100%, like, even if I didn't like that much Instagram before, I think that now it's almost a must if you want to connect with other people and if you want to show to the world what you think people should know.
Amazing. Thank you both for that. We have a question that just came in for Selma. So Arshad asks, Selma, I think you mentioned how you had caught a politician out who initially wanted to use the work you were doing with others to gain so-called brownie points to help improve their own image. Did you think something similar took place at COP?
That's a funny question. Thank you, Arshad. Just for some context, basically what happened is over the summer, we met with the Minister of the Economy of Luxembourg. I don't know if I'm allowed to say this. Whatever, I already said it on the internet, so can't go back. But yes, so we had met with them, and interestingly enough, we received an email that we weren't supposed to receive. It wasn't the minister himself. It was like his deputy who said it, basically telling the communications, oh yes, please don't forget to take pictures with the kids. It'll look so great for the upcoming election. And so basically just kind of utilizing us for his image, which we were quite annoyed about, because that's literally the number one thing that we want to avoid when meeting politicians. And that's why we stay so apolitical most of the time and neutral. And I think COP was quite similar to that in the sense that we would be encouraged and celebrated for protesting. Like I remember we did this protest inside of COP towards, like, I think it was the last day or the before last day of negotiations. And it was like in the hallway, and we had these signs basically saying to European leaders, act now and pay up the 100 billion you promised, and pay up for the funds that you were promising for the loss and damage clause. And we would have people being like, yes, perfect, and stuff. And I was like, okay, something's going to change. Yes. And then nothing did. So in the end, people would take pictures, celebrate it, maybe repost it on their LinkedIn. I don't know, be like, yes, the youth is here. And then the reality is that when you actually go into COP, like most of the people were 50 plus. I could count the young people on like my two hands. And just trying to portray an even more diverse and younger image of COP than what really was definitely something that I felt as well happen. And it's just the fact that we were genuinely like blocked off from a bunch of negotiations and blocked off from a lot of zones just said a lot. So you're willing to post us online and you're willing to stand with us for pictures, but you're not willing to give us a seat at the table. And that's why I think so many of us were really, really mad and disappointed.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks for sharing that. Okay, can both of you mute real quick because there's a bit of an echo? There we go. Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, I was saying thank you for sharing. We hope you don't get in trouble for sharing that after all. I guess a follow-up question from that is, obviously things are not easy for you guys. Many times you're, as you said, locked out of the rooms, or you're used as the brownie point young person. So what makes you keep going? Like, is there something that kind of keeps you motivated? Carlos, you want to start?
Sure. I think that we have to highlight a new term that I learned during my time in Glasgow, which is youth washing. I think that what Selma was referring to is literally the concept of youth washing, which refers to basically like pretending that you support, the young people while you are not, just like greenwashing, right? So I mean, I was mentioning this before, during, and after COP26. What really brings me some hope is not, the global leaders negotiating in Glasgow. It's not the key outcomes, but it's the young people and the minorities outside of the blue zone, in the streets, in the marches. Again, we saw literally over 100,000 people in the street in the marching on Saturday. That was huge. I got to meet, some of the most influential youth activists, and they're even like younger than us. And I was very impressed of the, potential that they have. So that's literally what brings me some hope, because if you look at the facts, if you look at the physical situation, you soon realize that we are in a big problem, that in many cases people, we tend to see climate change as something that will be fixed somehow eventually, but actually we are about to meet this turning point, and it's hard to remain hopeful. So we need a miracle at the end of the day, and the miracle for me is the young people, the minorities, the indigenous people who were very noisy. So even though, you know, we've seen, we haven't seen enough, there's been some progress, some tangible progress that has to be said. But yeah, like people like, you know, Greta Thunberg is of course the biggest example, but also some people that are not that well known, that have very good communication skills, that have so much knowledge and so much courage and passion and anger, the ones that, you know, will make the difference, I think. So yeah, it's all about the non-global leaders, essentially. I would say. I mean, it's true that, you know, they're not all doing not enough. Like some global leaders are quite, you know, great, like the Barbados president, if I'm wrong. But yeah, it's pretty much us, people like us who are in these events that brings me hope.
You're right. Actually, she is the president now since it's independent, which is great. But yes, I think
Okay.
trying to echo what you were
Thanks for
saying
that.
about-
It seems that we have a bit of a connection issue with Selma. Selma, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear her still. It's working for me.
Okay, perfect. All right. So do you have
I
any
don't know
thoughts
about
on
the
that?
others.
Sure. Yes, so just answering to Carlos, it's true that the Prime Minister of Barbados is now the president, which is great. But kind of echoing to what you were saying, I think what brings me hope as well is not the people leading and giving the kind of mild orders. It's the people who are asking for these orders to be taken. An example, and kind of referring to Arshad's question earlier, is, so I had participated kind of like you, Carlos, at COI, but it was pre-COP 26. So it was basically the same thing as COP26, but only like leaders, activists and young militants from the whole entire world. So it was 2 of us per country. I was representing Luxembourg, and total, I don't know, there was many of us, like 400 or something. And we came up with a manifesto of very clear demands of what we wanted from the leaders to include in their negotiations. And in the end, only 20 delegations took in our negotiation points, which we were sort of disappointed about, because we were kind of under the impression that it was going to be this big thing and this big collaboration. And there was a meeting basically between the pre-COP participants and the COP presidents and some of the COP participants to supposedly get our feedback. And I think I talked about this last time, but they weren't so keen on hearing our feedback. They were quite actually offended in a way when we said that we were really disappointed that not more delegations had taken our points into consideration, and that we felt kind of unheard. And then we brought up some of the points that we felt were inconsistent with their messaging of COP being as this like youth-driven, global South-driven events. Like for instance, the fact that we couldn't even get into certain rooms or negotiations, and there was like a patronizing tone from the pre-COP and COP presidents towards us. But what really inspired me is the people who had the nerve to answer to them and the nerve to stand in front of the COP and pre-COP presidents. These people who, like, to us, young people who are even like in our 20s sometimes, hold so much power. And I think that's what inspires me, is like the nerve and the audacity, because we know that we don't have a choice. I mean, speaking for myself, I don't have a choice as well, even though it's kind of farther. But for some people, it's literally they don't have a choice. Like the youth from the Pacific area and zone, they were talking about at the second, I think, protest about their new slogan, which was we will not drown, we will fight back. Because some of these people literally live 2 meters above the ocean level, and it's not a matter of perhaps, but a matter of when they might actually sink. And so I think the people who are fighting back in the face of the biggest existential threat and danger, and in the face of really powerful politicians who have so much more reach and power than them, I think those are the people who really inspire me.
Yeah, 100%. I don't know if Antri can see us, but just to add on that, I think that our psychology also plays a big role. Like we tend to see, again, this big threat as something that might happen at some point, but it's not that urgent. And it was very disappointing for me. This a quick anecdote, that I got to meet the Minister of Climate Change, essentially, of the Canary Islands, and I did an interview with him. like asking questions about like, what are the ambitions of the Canary Islands towards net zero, towards mitigation, towards adaptation and resilience, etc. And we basically, were telling very calmly, very normally, that the Canary Islands are actually being threatened, and we don't really know what the potential consequences might be. But in the next decades, it's quite likely, and that this is a bit of a speculative conclusion, but we're very likely to have many villages, or many towns that are by the sea flooded, or heat waves that will make a big difference on our health and potentially our tourism. So it was very disappointing to combine this with the next interview that I did, which was with the young representative of Belize, this small country in Latin America, which is already seeing the devastating climate change catastrophes. They are literally losing 7% of the GDP in literally adaptation for climate change. They are already in a very, very bad situation. And I think that the main difference between, say, the global south or the least privileged countries with the most privileged countries is time. Like eventually, it will be, it's a matter of time. Like we're all on the same boat. We're all in the same ecosystem with it, which is Earth. And we don't really realize that even Germany, even Spain, even France, even the US will be threatened. And it's all about time, and it's increasing exponentially throughout the years.
Lovely. Thank you both for that. Hopefully, we will be able to save the situation before it gets to the point where you were just describing, Carlos. I was just wondering, so you were both talking about this different activists that you met up with. So my question is, do you feel like the concept of a climate activist or a youth climate activist is inclusive, or do you think it is to an extent very Eurocentric or white potentially? So Selma, you were mentioning your heritage earlier. Like, do you feel like the term climate activist kind of captures everything of your experience and who you are?
I think being a climate activist is inherently a privilege because at least there's some, and I know that was kind of one of the things that we were talking about at pre-COP 26, is that, for instance, my government will listen to me. My government is willing to literally meet with us multiple times. We've met with them I literally don't know how many times. And that's just because they're willing to listen, because we live in a democracy, and that's great and wonderful, and I'm really thankful and appreciative. But then we had other youth that were talking to the ministers, because there was a day where like the ministers of the world came and spoke with us. Although that was also dodgy the way that, anyways, I'm not going to complain. But so the questions that they were raising is like, listen, it's great that we're here. It's great that we're pre-COP, but our leaders will literally not listen to us. Our leaders literally do not care. Some of them don't even recognize the existence of climate crisis. What can we do? And we kind of came to a wall and a kind of a problem in decision making, because it's true, there was nothing to be done. And the only thing that we can do is through the United Nations, try to help our fellow climate activists who cannot act. So I would say there's a structural problem there in the fact that people within their own countries can't raise their voice. But also, I think even in the international spaces that we try to create so that all of us are heard, there's also an issue. I know that, for instance, my good friend from the Mapa region, she's from Zimbabwe, and she was telling me that even at at COP, she felt that there was some like barriers and some disdain in the way that she was being heard versus how somebody from Germany would be heard. She was receiving less like media attention. She was receiving less meetings, and she just felt that overall she had just less access and less of a voice. Even resource-wise, I think the fact that a lot of MAPA people weren't able to even get to COP26 because it was so expensive. I know it was expensive for me coming from Luxembourg, so I cannot imagine what it was for somebody coming from Morocco or literally anybody anywhere else from the planet. So the way that, once again, it is a really privileged thing. I know so many people, so many youth who had to do GoFundMes and just get money however they could to even be able to get there. And once we were there, everything was so expensive. I mean, it was a whole hassle. So I think there's an issue on the like national structural level, but also the international one, that inherently makes climate activism a really privileged notion. I don't know what you think, Carlos.
Yeah, you're right, and that's a big topic. Just the inequalities raised at COP26 were huge. I'm not sure, but I think that COP26 was one of the least equal conference of parties. And yeah, I can tell from my experience at COI, like you see a positive relation between the price of the tickets to get to COI in Glasgow with the distance that you have to travel. That's a fact, right? So the United Nations wouldn't fund our trips because of carbon emissions, because of the carbon emissions that they produce. But it gets super expensive, and there's so many barriers in terms of visas and stuff. But going back to the question of the definition or the inclusivity of climate activists, I think, as Selma said, there is like in our case, for example, I live in Spain. I study in the UK. I'm quite safe, and I'm not suffering the climate change consequences that severely right now, as of today, in 2021. So it's almost like my decision to raise my voice and use my privilege to make a change. However, in the global south, more than a privilege, it's almost like a necessity. And in countries like where you don't have such a democratic system, and you don't really have that much of freedom of voice. A great example is Colombia. I met many Colombian activists who were taking the lead in the fight against climate change, promoting awareness, and so many activists in Colombia specifically are killed because of the political views, of the political critiques, or simply because they raise their voice towards this. So is it inclusive? Well, I think that we are seeing a more desperate, a more powerful urge of the global south activists. Those are really are suffering the consequences, and know that in the future that will be a huge change. But I think it's predominating in the global north still. Like in the UK, it's so easy to just have this technology to promote awareness. It's so easy to just go to government and criticize anything that Boris Johnson said, for example. So it's quite easy, but it's not that inclusive as it should be. I think that it's getting more and more inclusive. I think that more and more, young people from minority ethnic groups, for disadvantaged backgrounds, are having some voice. And again, this is thanks largely to the social media and the technology that we have that makes the world more globalized. But as of today, it's improvable.
Great, thank you.
If I could just add on to that, Carlos, I think.
Yeah, go ahead.
Andrew, could I just add? I think you really nailed the point there, where it's like, for us, it's kind of a luxury. We can do it, if we think it's like a fun activity, although that's not how I view it at all. But if it's like something we want to add, like an extracurricular or something. But for instance, I have a lot of family in Morocco, in a small village, like at the east. And a lot of them work in agriculture and work in the fields. And for them, when there's a drought, or for them when there's not enough food because of climate crisis consequences, it's not a matter of if they want to raise their voice, it's a matter of they have to, but they don't have the means to do so. And they don't get to call themselves climate activists. They get to call themselves people just trying to survive in these conditions. And I think that that's really a point where I'm like, whoa, I need to back up and genuinely realize my privilege, and realize that each time that I speak, I may be taking away space for other people from the global south. So that's something that we always try to be wary of in a movement, although I know it's not perfect. And that's what a lot of my MAPA friends tell me, is that it's genuinely not always perfect. And they often feel like they're being spoken over. So I think that's just something we literally always have to make sure, even in the protests, like we need to have certain parts and certain speeches that are dedicated more towards those parts of the world simply because they're more affected and deserve to speak more about it because just they know more about it than we do. I think something like 70% of biodiversity is held by indigenous peoples and indigenous lands. So that just shows how much we really don't have, we don't know so much in comparison. And that's something we really try to respect, I think, globally. I think, Carlos, you may be agreeing. We just need to be mindful about that in our definition of climate warriors or climate activists.
Exactly, and just to follow up, if we were to, represent and basing our numbers in the people that are affected against the people that are being on social media, on the TV, and are considered as climate activists, I think that we'll see literally, every single channel with people from Africa, people from South America, people from Southeast Asia. And what we really see is literally like, I mean, it's not that Greta Thunberg is evil. It's not that Greta Thunberg shouldn't be the main face, but she's in a very privileged position, and she's also proactively encouraging social media to add these other people. Like now, I'll say like the second biggest face that we see is Vanessa Nakatsu. I think she's like giving very inspirational and very emotional speeches, and alongside with Greta Thunberg. So that's like the other side of the same coin. So that's great. Again, we're seeing a lot of progress, but it's not enough at all. And if we were to represent everyone that is suffering climate change, we literally have like a very different picture and a very different narrative. But that's something that we saw again outside of the COP26 in Glasgow. In the protests, after the protest, when people were raising their voices, a friend of mine from Brazil, Marcelo, he's a founder of an organization that fights racial injustice and climate change and climate justice potentially. And he was there. He got a lot of attention, and he is changing the rules of the game. So it's all about time, I think.
Great, thank you both, and thank you, Carlos, for mentioning a few other people to follow. And I guess as a follow-up from that, Selma, are there resources you use to educate yourself about climate change? Are there certain individuals that perhaps don't get that much attention, but you really think we should follow more? And after this call, we will be producing a research document with NGOs and social media accounts for people to follow. So keep an eye out for that. But it would be great to hear your thoughts.
Sure. So actually, like the one friend that I kept referring to in my mind is this amazing girl who we're the same age, and her name is Colette Levy-Brown. I'll put her at somewhere, and she's just amazing. I think her activism is really unapologetic. Like she was not afraid to raise her hand and call out leaders in the pre-COP, and I was like, how are you able to do this? Like, how are you not deathly afraid of these ministers and these? But she didn't care, and I think that's what's great about her. Another person that I really think is great is my co-delegate. He's also from Luxembourg, but he's half Southeast Asian, and he's called, I think, Watermelon Activist on Instagram. And his way of educating is different because it's not only about it's about the environment, but also socialism. It's kind of like socialism, environmentalism, which I don't know a lot about, but it's great to have that new source. And I guess the way that I inform myself is mostly through science. So kind of like Carlos was talking about is the IPCC reports. And I know in the beginning, when I started becoming an activist, a really interesting resource was 350.org. They would come and they would form us to become better activists, know more about the science, and know more about how to engage in civil disobedience and that kind of thing. And then, I think that's about all the resources, and just continually trying to educate myself. Like there's this really great documentary called Bigger Than Us, I think, that came out recently, which is really great as well. So I think those resources are to be noted. And I was working during COP26. The people who sent me there, who like gave me accreditation, they're called ASTM. So it's Association Solidarité Tiers Monde. So it's basically an organization in Luxembourg that's solidarity between the global North and global South. So great insight from people from Southeast Asia. That was really great. And yeah, I think that's about all the really cool resources I know about.
Same in my case, like when it comes to educating yourself about climate change.
Great, thanks for that. Carlos, I'm not sure if you can
Yes,
hear us
can you
right
hear
now?
me? I can.
I can hear
Can you
you.
hear me? Yeah.
Okay, fine.
All right, there we go. So when it comes to climate change, so I would say like learn about anything in general. You know, when it's an online source, you know, who like the source really matters. Basically, like you have to be very wary of, you know, who you are reading, who are you listening to, because nowadays, you know, we live in an era not only of information but of misinformation. So the IPCC is a great example, even though it's quite hard to understand it sometimes. It's very technical, and the vocabulary that they use is you know, it's made for policymakers and not that inclusive in terms of the civic society. But actually, that was one of the main reasons why I got involved in that seriously in climate change. When I read the IPCC, the fourth assessment of the IPCC, the summary for policymakers, you know, I got that awareness, that that source of awareness, and I became aware of, you know, the real situation. So the IPCC is definitely something that you have to look after, or the science, the scientific community in general. Sorry. A more inclusive way of learning about climate change is the media, and again, you have to be very careful. I think that the Guardian is one of the best, you know, magazines, newspapers that clearly showcase how climate change is impacting the lives of so many people. And in terms of, you know, people, like when it comes to specific case studies, just for you know, this activist from Leonardo DiCaprio, you know, who is very well renowned, to the other you know, activists and representatives of given countries. So, for example, I met some friends from Chile, and I got to know about how the political situation works there, what's going on in Chile, thanks to the, you know, posts and stories on Instagram, even on LinkedIn. So that's very useful. Or people like Francisco Vera, who is a 12-year-old activist who is doing wonders. He's super inspirational. Not that, you know, he doesn't give that many like technical insights, but he has a philosophy and a simplicity when speaking that, you know, is super admirable. So yeah, just you know, the main activists that are quite well renowned in the sense that, you know, you can trust what they say. The Guardian, and I use LinkedIn for everything. To be fair, like I have a very good mixture of posts in my feed, so I just like select what, you know, my connection has published or what's going on. And the UN reports, yeah, 100%. Sorry, I forgot to mention the UN reports, the UNFCCC summary, the GAP reports, and the SDGs reports, Sustainable Development Goals analysis. Those are crucial. And international organizations like, you know, the Energy Agency and so many others that you will find. So yeah, we can feed back into this list that you're making later, and I will take a look in more detail.
Yeah, that would be great. We just want to take a moment to say thank you to everyone who's joined us. We've had people from Bolivia and from many different countries around the world. So thank you all for joining us tonight for this really great call. So thank you for all those resources. And sorry for the barking of the dog.
It's all right.
So since we started to talk about information and how you inform yourself about climate change, how was climate education when you were in school? When we were at COP with AXA, we got to talk with the UK School Sustainability Network, and they told us how little knowledge there is about climate change or how specialist there is, i.e., it's only in science subjects or in geography. Was that the case when you were in school?
Yeah, I remember that similarly, it was only, I think, in science that we did that throughout my whole schooling, I think. And well, okay, it was already something that we learned about, like pollution and like when you put like the plastic with the other plastics, but it was quite rudimentary, it wasn't anything like the existential threat that we're facing now. And I think it was really great that during COP, one of the main advances was to agree unilaterally that we would have more climate education uh, throughout the world. I'm not super familiar, so I'll let Carlos speak. But yeah, that was kind of my how I became familiar with that. And so we had to kind of educate ourselves when we became activists. So as I said, 350.org was a really great resource, but then also CAN Europe, which is like Climate Action Network, really helped us when we were inside of COP to organize civil disobedience. So on the last day of negotiations, because everybody knew where it was going, there was a plenary session and everybody got up and just left in protest. And I think it was mostly because CAN Europe was able to educate us, the people who were not allowed inside of many negotiations, by kind of unifying all the information that they had, unifying all of the info, making it simple, understandable to the basic reader. As you said, Carlos, sometimes APCC reports, I'm like, what is this even saying? So that kind of resource is super important, and I wish we had them in school as well.
Yeah, I think that the problem relies on the complexity of climate change and against the needs for people to understand it. It can be quite tricky, and there are so many ways to approach climate change. And I think that there's not a single person that understands every single component of climate change perfectly. But at the same time, it's a need. Like when we talk about reducing emissions, we talk about changing the society's behavior, the people's behavior towards the consumption, for example, whether it's clothes, food, or how they recycle, how they reduce the waste, etc. So it is crucial to have, in my opinion, a formal climate education. We have very, very, very good resources online. We have very, very good online courses, but they are optional. They are optional, and we have to ensure that even if you are not interested, you have some degree of knowledge around this wicked topic. So in my case, not really. Even though I have quite a good education, I think like I was very privileged given my circumstances. I didn't really have that much of education about climate change. It is true that, and this was quite remarkable, during a biology lesson at school, in high school, I remember that our teacher played us An Inconvenient Truth by Al Gore, which is one of the most famous, I think, climate change documentaries. So that literally changed my mind, and it was during the same time where I read IPCC. So I was like starting to think about climate change and understand it better. But that was optional. In my case, I got to read the IPCC by chance because I was in research and I was interested. And my teacher, he decided to screen that documentary because he thought that it was appropriate. But I think that the more I think about climate change, the more I realize that it's all about politics and education. In my opinion, where we have like 95% of the science, we have the knowledge, but we don't have the political will, and people are not that on board. So, for example, like 350.org or the IPCC or other online sources are great, but that's for the people that are interested, and we have to ensure that, which is harder, we have to ensure that the people that are not on board get on board, which is a very big structural change. And in my case, now that I've realized and comprehend better that we really need more education, especially in the higher education institutions like the university. I'm working with the Learning and Teaching Institute of my university. I mentioned this earlier, to embed sustainable development in the curriculum. So that's a very big, shift of our approach, our philosophy in education. So it's not just a tick box unit that you can take, but it's actually like every single lecturer, academic, and professor, teaching the respective subjects in a different way. So, for example, in my case, I'm studying biology, so we can learn about how biodiversity loss is so important. What was the role of food production in the future, or some other topics, or even in medicine, you can learn how to contribute to good health and well-being, or even your waste. So that's super important. And if we need this economic change and get this different approach to capitalism, we have to ensure that the people that are the problem, including us, know that we are the problem, and what we can do afterwards.
Great, thank you for that. So we've been live for 56 minutes, and I don't even know how time went by so quickly. But obviously, when you have great company, time goes by really quickly. So we're gonna start kind of rounding off the conversation, and I'll pick up something that Carlos mentioned earlier, which was that I don't think there is no one that understands every single aspect of climate change. When Ax and I were in COP, we saw so many young people who were passionate about climate change, but thought, I don't know enough to talk. Like, who am I? What credentials do I have to talk? And so let's round this conversation off with a bit of a call to action. So what would you tell all these young people who are really keen, but they just feel they don't know enough?
Okay, I'll go. I think that's exactly, you really defined like how I've been feeling for the past like 3-4 years, especially in the beginning, like when I was 16 and just starting out, I was like, what are my credentials? A random person from Luxembourg, like. But education truly is the source of empowerment, because once somebody finally explained to me what the like different curves in the IPCC reports meant, something just clicked in my brain, and the existential threat was clearer than ever. And it's since been impossible for me to like ignore it. It's just part of my brain. It's like something I think about all the time. And I think it's something that we should genuinely, as a community of people and human beings, should be considering at all times if we want to be able to survive it and get around it. So if there's something that I could say, a call to action is that you're never too uneducated to take action. You're never too young to not take action. You're never too alone to take action. You can literally, one person makes a huge change, 2 people even better. So just find your local community of climate activists. If it doesn't exist, create it. It might seem super daunting, but it's possible. All of the resources, thankfully, are online. So if you do have access to internet, that's wonderful. Just know that there are some simplified versions of the IPCC reports Carlos was talking about, some simplified versions of the UN reports that I really used during COP26 to understand what was going on. And you will always find a way, even if it's like through a YouTube video, and that's how you'll understand climate change. That's great. And it's already a wonderful step that you're taking towards change. And I think if we can't make the people empowered change, it's for us to be the change. So if you're still young, I would advise, because that's literally the only thing I can do other than be an activist, is study and get into power somehow and make decisions yourself if we still have the time. That's another conversation. But yeah, that's what I would say, is you're never too educated to make a change. Find those tools, use them, and make your voice heard. Carlos, go for it.
Sure, I'll try to be brief, given the time that we have left. But yeah, you highlighted very well, the education issues that we have. I think that I would start by, every person is different, so we have to understand what our situation is. Like, what are my strengths, what my weakness is, what can I learn, what do I learn, what have I learned so far. So yeah, climate change is super complex. Like, you cannot know everything. There's food waste. There's renewable energy. Within renewable energy, you have, hydrothermal. You have wind, solar. It's super complex, and even like you don't have to be a professional scientist. You have to have a PhD. You have to be a doctorate, in glaciology to have a decent understanding of the general picture, of the big picture. So as long as you have some, background in what the IPCC says, I think that's a very good starting point. And the UN reports emissions, biodiversity. Watch some videos, watch documentaries which synthesize super well, these problems. When we talk about meat consumption, you have the true cost, you have cowspiracy, you have seaspiracy. So it's all about, it's a whole process. Even myself, like I don't consider myself an expert at all, but I'm learning every single day, every single time that I read a blog, an article that I hear from this other person. So it's a whole process, and once you have some degree of understanding, I think that if I want to specialize, in creating some impact, I will pick one or two topics. So if you're super passionate about meat consumption, get super involved in this topic, read every single article that you know about meat consumption, and then be that one expert in meat consumption, having this global mindset and considering the other factors that relates to climate change, whether it's agriculture, whether it's human behavior, etc. So it's super complex, and I think that you never know all of the elements within this huge topic. But yeah, I think that I have no more time.
No, there's always so much to talk about, but thank you both for that. Thank you for taking the time out of your really busy schedules to join us, and thank you to our audience for tuning in. We will make sure to share any social media links of Selma and Carlos again, so we can follow your incredible journeys. And to our audience, if you want to see any more Global Voices calls, potentially on a different topic, then let us know, and we'd love to keep the conversations going. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
you